Hey guys, what's up? Got an interesting question a while ago. I had already answered the question and made a video about it with this little thing at work, but I was just reviewing it and I didn't like how it came out, so I'm going to try again. I apologize to the guy who sent me the question. This is late. This was supposed to have been put up a while ago. There's a hell of a lot of crap that I got caught up with, and I'm sorry about that. And I'll talk about that, I guess, in another video or something. Anyway. I thought this was an interesting question, but some people might consider it to be a bit of a controversial one. So, to protect the guy that asked me the question, I am not going to reveal his name because I really don't want people, jumping down his throat, attacking him, going, "What the fuck?" Because I don't think he really meant anything by it. And I honestly do think it's a question that a lot of people ask, but are probably afraid to ask out loud. It's probably one that they got in their head. So, dude, because I know you're watching this, I will kind of frame it, as I'm talking to you, because it'll be easier for me that way. I am recounting this question from memory simply because I am too lazy right now to actually go in my computer screen and look up the freaking question because I got a whole lot of other crap on my screen. That's stuff I'm working on. Let me get on with it. The question basically went something like this. The guy, you basically were asking me, they were telling me that, me as an African American and you as a white American, there's certain perspectives on life in this country that you may not be privy to, but that was something that you were wondering, and it was basically, you were thinking about how, back during slavery times, back during times when slavery was practiced in the United States, blacks, of course, were taken from a certain region of Africa and brought here. And as the country developed and their descendants slowly began to get integrated into this country and the standard of living increased, things might not necessarily have increased in Africa. So your question more or less just boiled down to this. Are the descendants of those taken as slaves who are now living in the United States luckier or better off living here than they would have been had their ancestors not have been taken as slaves in Africa? Like, in other words, are the descendants black descendants living here in America better off than black descendants living back in Africa who hadn't been taken, considering what's going on over there? Interesting question, and I can see how some people would take offense to it. The short answer, yes and no. It depends. See, first off, I noticed with this question, there seems to be this mistake that people always make concerning Africa. And again, it's because of how the media portrays it and how little history is taught about the place. They always treat Africa as it's this one big country. It's not. It's one big continent with a whole lot of different countries in there. And just like on any nation, some nations, you live there, you aren't doing too good. In other nations, you live there, you're probably doing okay. Some countries in Africa are doing rather poorly. Other countries in Africa are doing okay. You can live pretty decently over there. They're doing fairly okay. I wouldn't necessarily put them at the level of the United States, but it's not like if you're living over there, you're fucked. No, there's some places where you're able to go about your daily life. You can you got a decent living. It's the same thing in the United States, by the way. There are certain places in this country where I would not want to get caught in, and then there's other places where I've had no problem. I'm happy to live there. Even in some of the more, and I'm going to use the term on purpose, some of the more liberal places in this country, there's still spots where you don't necessarily want to get caught in, and there's a couple of places that make you feel uncomfortable. For instance, New York City, generally, and I say generally, you're black and you can live there with little problem, but there are things that can happen, and depending on where you live in New York, depends on whether you're going to get harassed or not. But even then, they still put laws and certain things in place, and there's a certain image to maintain where you can do okay. Atlanta, Georgia, for instance, some people call that almost like a black mecca. A lot of black people run businesses there, they're in government and all that, and it's an okay place to live. And there are other places in the country where it's pretty cosmopolitan. Whites, blacks, Chinese, whatever, they can more or less get along, with minimal problems. There, of course, are other places in this country than, I don't care how much people are going to try to say, no, that's not true. There are certain places where black people are just not welcome. They aren't welcome there at all, and if they try to live there, they're going to have problems. It's also, a place where certain Tea Partiers would congregate. Again, I know I get beef for mentioning this, but the fact remains that there are certain elements within the Tea Party movement that don't look too kindly on blacks, and that's part of the reason why they've joined the movement. There's people of all walks of life in the Tea Party. Some people have joined for more chivalrous reasons, and other people... But I'm getting off topic. I think that should answer the question, at least as far as the lucky thing goes. It depends on where you live. And I think Chris Rock said it best in a particular comedy act of his when it comes to being black living in the United States. He was basically saying that black people should consider the United States like that kindly old rich uncle who's willing to put you through college, but he molested you as a kid. So the path to success is a little bit different for blacks than it would be for whites, and I don't care how much people are going to try to deny it. I'm black, and I have a lot of white friends. I've seen the difference, and the way they are sometimes shocked when they see some of the shit that I got to put up with. What can I say? Now, there's something else. There's another part of the question that amused me when I first read it and caused me to chuckle, and I want to touch on that. It was how you phrased the question when you said that you called me an African American and you called yourself a white American. And this caused me to laugh a little bit. I chuckled a bit when I read that. And I'm wondering if any other people see a little bit, see why that amused me so much. That's because there's two different criteria being used here. If you're calling me an African American and you're calling yourself a white American, you're using two different types of criteria that don't necessarily go together. You're using either the color of one's skin to denote the type of American one can be, i.e. outward appearance or race, and then the other criteria, when you call me an African American, is ancestry. So using two different types. They don't necessarily work together. And both of them have flaws. First of all, there are no white people. We need to get rid of that image, okay? There are no white people walking around. This is white, okay? This is white. If you are a Caucasian, you are not white. You're some shade of pink or light beige or maybe even light brown, but you are not white. Just like I am not black. I'm brown. All human beings walking on this planet are different shades of brown and pink. We are not black and white. I sometimes think the constant usage of the term black and white is being done on purpose, or it reflects a certain part of our society to label ourselves certain labels that cause some type of mental clash. Think about it. Black and white are always on opposite ends of the spectrum. They can't really get along. George Carlin, I'm bringing up a comedian again. George Carlin had a pretty interesting take on it. He said that, think about it, when we call ourselves black and white are two opposites and they really can't come together. Pink and brown, on the other hand, just might be able to mix and harmonize. And I'm thinking that myself. The other aspect, though, calling me an African American, really causes one to chuckle when they think about it. If you're going to call me an African American, you can't call yourself a white American. Of course, I can touch on the fact that most white Americans simply call themselves Americans, period, and everybody else has to have that little thing in front of their name, but that's a subject for another video. If you're going to call me an African American, you can't call yourself a white American. So you'd have to work with the same criteria. So it would be like what? A European American? Which I think would make sense, considering that if you're going to call someone African American, again, you're bringing up the continent where one's ancestry is. So African American, and then the continent of Europe, European American. But if we're talking about ancestry, then we come up with an interesting little flaw in labeling people European American, Chinese American, and all that. See, because if you're talking about ancestry, then remember, everybody came from one source. It's not about how much melanin you have in your skin, which denotes your ancestry. Because, remember, archaeology and the beginnings of human life and all that, they talk about civilization popping up from one area and the species of Homo sapiens coming out from one area. So in essence, what that boils down to is that if we're going to be talking about ancestry and using a criteria of ancestry and trying to pick up a label of that before saying the word American, then that means everybody in this country is an African American. Whether you have hair like mine, or straight stringy hair, whether you have really dark skin, lots of melanin, or very little melanin, little white skin, well, pink skin, sorry. Everyone here is an African American. Think about it for a second. Catch you later.